as we always do for these Insights meetings. First of all, we're going to start off with Vicky Gottardo and Polly Britton giving a little bit of an overview of some work that we've been doing in the literacy and numeracy space. Then we're going to get Christina Bradley to do a bit of a review on where we're at with the UEE product review. Then Brett Willowhite is going to join us for a training product development update. And then, as usual, Kurt Hopkins will join us for a policy update, and there will be room for Q&A at the end. As always, with these events, we'll start off with an acknowledgement of country. Powering Skills Organisation acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. I'm joining you all from the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation here in Boorloo, Perth. And in the chat, if you'd just like to put in where you're joining us from so that we can understand the participation we've got from across this great country, that would be really appreciated. There'll be opportunities for questions at the end of the session, so please use the chat function and raise your hand if there is a question that you have. In the interests of time, it now gives me great pleasure to hand over to Vicky Gottardo and Polly Britton, who are going to give us a bit of an overview about the work we've been doing on the Foundation for Energy project. Thanks, Vicky.
Thanks, Nigel. Yes, so the Foundation for Energy Literacy and Numeracy for Energy Jobs. I just would like to lead off to say, if you want details on this project, it is on our website, and it's also worthwhile if you're interested in what's coming out in this project. Please follow us on our socials on LinkedIn, as well as our website, because the report that comes out of this will be notified through LinkedIn, also through our website. So go to the next slide. Thanks, Kaya. So this project, I'm just going to outline what we undertook with regards to this project. We partnered with, we went out to tender and ended up partnering with Future Energy Skills and Energy Skills Australia on this. They had been involved in analysis of the curriculum, analysis of the training packages that were involved with in the past. And so they were well positioned to assist us in what we were trying to bubble to the surface with regards to this project. Over the next slide, thanks, Kyle. And so why this project? You know, you can read that there, but when we went out in our first roadshows, you know, a couple of years ago, a lot of people were saying to us, when we were in the room, you have to be really good at maths. And it made us start thinking, what does that actually mean? And it's not only maths, it's also the literacy, and we also looked at the learning mindset of young people or anyone who goes through an apprenticeship. And we mapped and we looked at how people transition from year 9 in schools into occupations. So through the years to year 12, into the vet sector, and then into occupations. Where were the sticking points? Where was it hard? And where was the pathway unclear with regards to literacy, numeracy, and learning? Next slide, thank you. And please, at any time, if you have a question, pop it into the chat here, or you can ask us at the end. And so there were 4 stages to this project. We did a bit of a desktop analysis, or the team did that. We looked at the occupations, and that was the industry evidence layer. And we surveyed as well. We did a survey, 83 workers across seven energy sector occupations, and we mapped actual literacy, numeracy and learning tasks they perform daily against the Australian curriculum framework, or this ACSF. Stage 3 is looking at the curriculum comparison. And so we took senior secondary subjects from Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, and WA and rated them also against the framework. And then we applied an achievement scaling factor to reflect realistic student attainment rather than curriculum intent. And then in stage 4, we mapped the full pathway from year 9 through to early employment and identifying where risk concentrates. So the Australian Core Skills Framework is that government tool for describing core skill levels from 1 to 5. And it was used as a single benchmark across all 4 stages. It was the one way in which we could anchor this whole project to. So let's go on to the first finding. So the finding number 1 was around numeracy as being a critical constraint in this story. Now, we know the dropout rates, and we'll show you a map around that in year 1 and in year 2, like most dropout happen in that. I'd like to say up front, it's not necessarily just because of this reason, but it could be one of the contributing factors. And there's ways in which things that we can put in place around the training packages and assistance. And we know that a lot of RTOs do the heavy lifting around remediation in these areas. What this graph shows you is in the Australian curriculum. So in the graph below, it shows you at which level on the ACSF are these school subjects, and then where in the outcomes ACFS is the requirement. So a lot of schools recommend their students go and do, sometimes I actually have heard instances where they tell their students, you want to go and do a trade, let's say, you don't need maths. I've heard that happen. Or you need low level, you can get away with essential maths. Now, from our mapping, we found that not only, and I'm preaching to the converted on this call, is maths essential, but a lot of the recommendations may even be too low. In Queensland here, the lowest level maths in syllabus is essential maths, then it goes up to general maths, and then it goes up to math methods, and the highest level at maths is specialist maths. You can see that there for general maths even, which is the second highest level, it sits at 3.7. We found in the energy trades, it sits at level 4. So there is a bit of a gap that's happening between the recommendation in schools for what they should study and let's say the Cert 3 in electrotechnology. There is a gap that's there. And those of you who teach in RTOs will have seen this play out, seen that gap exist. I would say as a former high school science teacher, these results here were quite startling to me. And, I think at school level, we can assist giving better advice to both parents and students on the pathway they should take, and at the same time, actually there's 3 points here, and at the same time provide better gap development of these skills for people entering an apprenticeship. And the third level is also encourage those ones who are already doing high-level maths that this is actually a pretty good pathway for people to follow. Next slide, please. Literacy, we found it's broadly aligned. It's not totally absent from the concern here, but it is broadly aligned. We didn't find there was as much of a problem around literacy as there was around numeracy in that gap between school and doing a Cert 3. So that just shows you where we map the levels and where the VET requirement, you can see in reading 4.1 and writing 3.6. So we can see that there. This next graph on this next page is the one that actually blew my socks off. So next slide, please. So the project team had a look at some of the typical subjects that sit in first year and second year of the Cert 3 in electrotechnology. And as you can see there, you can see the left hand is ACSF level. And if you think back, remember general maths was sitting in the 3. So general maths is the second highest maths offered in many of the states and territories. However, it goes beyond 4 and in some cases beyond 4.5. So we also found that UEE, that 020 subject or unit of competency is where the greatest repeats are. So you can see between that graph at the right, that dotted line between year 1 and year 2, that is where the biggest repeats are or reattempts are. It also happens to be at not the exact time, but across that, I said it earlier, the first and second year, there is a number of reasons why people drop out, and that's something that we found and NCVER have highlighted. There are a number of reasons why people drop out, but if this is one of the many reasons, then there's ways that things that we can do to remediate that. Sarah, can we have this presentation to share with the schools an overview that when the paper comes out, the paper itself is going to be powerful, and we make a number of recommendations, and we tell the story and we show the data in a little bit better than this. It is very powerful, Sarah. I totally agree with you. And, you know, I was sitting on my son's in year 11. I was sitting on a bench at sport the other day with a parent whose child is in the same year and is going through vet courses, and he wants to be an electrician. And the school actually recommended that he doesn't need to do a maths because he wasn't enamored at it. And I kind of set her straight on that and said to her, well, that's absolutely wrong. And that is not the right advice the school is giving you. So let's go on to the next slide, please. So learning capability was a hidden area that we found. And so in our survey, what we found is that a lot of the schools don't teach people how to learn. And when we surveyed businesses, we found that this was a huge gap. Now, schools that are usually high performing, some of the, you know, if we look down the ATAR, some of the really high performing schools that do well in ATAR, for example, teach this skill, but not all schools teach it. And so teaching people how to learn or learning how to learn, metacognition, is a really important part of this story, and having a learning mindset is part of this story as well. We did also do an analysis on digital capability in this area, but we found it not to be as important. And the reason being is because of a lot of young people come with skill sets that already are quite, they are digital natives and they're quite digital savvy, not referring to mature age in that data. So just like to make that point. Next slide, thank you. So the pathway flow at the top here, Polly, did you want to, actually, no, I'll let you take over the next slide, but the pathway flow actually exists at certain transition points. And part of the project was identifying where it became high risk. And you can see the one, it's very high risk. Senior secondary is actually medium, and 9 and 10 to high, because we found that pathway selection of subjects is really important at that stage. You know, a lot of people are deciding on their future really early. We know that a lot of that sometimes starts in primary school, but subject selection at year 9 and 10, what you select in 9 has a knock-on effect to year 10. What you select in 10 has a knock-on effect to year 11. It is a really crucial time in selecting your pathway through to the future. And it's a really hard time, right? When are you supposed to know at a young person? A lot of people don't know what pathway they need to move into, but no, maths is not the answer. There are some states and territories that maths is not compulsory. And, you know, that's probably not the way we should be going as a country if we want people to move into these trades. Next slide, I'm going to hand over to Polly, who actually, before you go, Polly, so Polly Britton was PSO's project lead for this, and it really played an instrumental path in bringing this work to light with Future Energy Skills and Energy Skills Australia. So over to you, Polly.
Thanks, Vicky. So looking at the next slide, please, Kaya. Perfect. So one before. Didn't realise you'd switched it. So let's look at the implications and what needs to change. So these 6 implications flow directly from the findings. They're not general recommendation. Each maps to a specific gap identified in the evidence. So point number 1 there. So communicate numeracy expectations early. Career advisors and schools need to know the ACSF level 4 numeracy is the threshold. This isn't currently communicated clearly at a subject selection time. Number 2, pathway-wide alignment. So bridging programs at vet entry after school are too late and too weak. The fix has to start at year 9, not year 12. One recommendation included undertaking Certificate 2 in electrotechnology or engineering to meet the required numeracy for successful transition. Number 3, embed LLN or literacy learning and numeracy in vocational pathways. So South Australia's VET and SACE model, which requires LLN assessment, is identified as best practice nationally. Number 4, restructure the Certificate 3 sequence. The sudden numeracy jump at UEE CD 0044 and UEE L0020 is a design problem in the qualification, not just a student problem. Better scaffolding across the full qualification would reduce the cliff effect. Number 5, activate free bridging resources. So Studiosity, Khan Academy, WooTube, AMSI, Calculate are all free, available and effective. They need to be embedded at transition points, not left for students to discover themselves. And finally, number 6, address equity. Gender imbalance, regional students and those without strong support networks face compounded risks. For example, the research evidence determined that generally speaking, women excel in literacy and men excel in numeracy, therefore a targeted system response is required. All right, and finally, wrapping up this research. So the bottom line, Australia has the educational infrastructure, the options exist. What's broken is the alignment between what those options deliver and what energy trades actually require. So I leave you with 5 things to consider. ACSF Level 4 numeracy is the threshold, not aspirational. It's the functional minimum for safe electrical work. Number 2, the gap is structural. It's about what the curriculum delivers to most students, not about individual failure or effort. Number 3, literacy is largely fine. It's learning self-management that is the hidden pressure multiplier, also known as self-directed learning. Number 4, risk is predictable. Year 9 subject selection, the school to vet gap, and the 1st and 2nd year apprentice numeracy cliff. We know where to intervene. And finally, number 5, late remediation doesn't work. The solution has to be built into the pathway from the start. So as Vicky said, you can find the full report shortly. We have got all 4 phases up on the website at the moment for complete information. Are there any questions?
I see that there's a number of questions going through into the chat, which is fabulous. Thank you, Marie, for yours. I always am interested in considering your reach is huge from a student body. So I do agree about attitude and self-perception, ability. You know, I know not all schools are setting students up to become an electrician. That's not what they are. I often talk about schools being generalists, institutions, not specialists. However, there's a lot they can do to foster a love of learning and a love of maths. We know as people who've been out in the world that you never stop using maths, and I definitely feel that maybe we're on the wrong side not recommending maths, saying it's not compulsory in year 11 and 12. So so please look out for the study, as it should be dropping. We're at the design out stage. Then we'll need to consult with the government a little bit on it, but we're looking anywhere between 4 and 6 weeks before it's released. So keep an eye for it. We're a bit excited about this because it has not only in the energy sector, it has far-reaching implications across all jobs and skills councils, we think, and how they think about the curriculum from school into the vet sector. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Vicky. Thanks, Polly, and thanks everyone for the questions that you put in the chat. This bit of work provides an evidence base, and as you all know, PSO is about evidence base in the work that we do. It provides a huge amount of evidence towards some really significant issues and ensuring that the investment that we make in our energy trade apprentices is appropriate and gets us to the very important completions. Next up, we have Christine Bradley, who is going to give us a little bit of an overview about where things are at with the UEE full review. And I think, as Anthea has mentioned in previous insights, this is probably the largest piece of work that PSO will do in the foreseeable future. So I'll hand over to Christina.
Thanks, Nigel, and good afternoon, everybody. Just before we get started, I've put the link to the project in the chat for you so that you can go to our frequently asked questions tab. We've added a new tab to that project site so that any questions that we receive regularly, we will be adding to that list over the course of this project. So I guess we've given you an update on this project a few times, but just to reiterate, we are looking at the full UEE training package from your Cert 1 through to your advanced diplomas, and really looking at making sure that the qualifications align with your job outcomes, and that the qualifications and the units within them are being put together to ensure that the person gets the right skills to be able to do the job upon completion of their qualifications. So the LLM project that Vicky and Polly were talking to you about is helping inform the review of our training packages in how we're ensuring that the ACSF level outcomes of the qualification are aligned to the needs of the industry. So if we go to the next slide, I wanted to give you an update because we get a lot of questions about where are you at, what are you doing, how far along are you with your review, and we're halfway through, or nearly halfway through the year, which is scary in itself, but we are halfway through this project. So on your slide here, you will see that we have over 400 unique training products, whether that's a qualification, a unit of competency, or a skill set, in draft or being developed at the moment. We have 10 SME groups working on this. Every month we meet with them, plus the technical committee that's overviewing or ensuring that the development aligns with the training package organising framework for when we submit it to JUA for review. So over 400 training products are being developed. 200 odd have not been started yet. And then we've got about 150 odd training products that have been parked. Parked means that we are not, they may be removed later down the track when we release the full UEE, or that we, with the SME groups, are still determining whether they are viable and will contribute to that competent person that we're looking at. We have a lot of units of competency and a lot of skill sets that are not being used and have not been used for some time. So we're reviewing the purpose of those units, and sometimes it's because if they're just not fit for purpose, but if we modify them, then they'll be used again. So each month we can give you an update, if you like, on how we're tracking with this, but also make sure you keep an eye on that project page, because we provide updates regularly on there as well. If we go to our next slide, some of the things that we have been looking at in terms of the qualifications, and part of the qualification reform project that was led by Jewel, was we needed to look at ensuring that our qualifications supported clear job outcomes. And through the qualification reform, plus our low and no enrolment project that we completed last year, we started looking at whether we can consolidate qualifications to make it easier to navigate the system. So what we find is that with post-trade in particular, there are a lot of qualifications that would be considered a duplicate or duplicating each other with slightly different outcomes, but in essence, 80% of the qualifications are the same. So when we started to look at that and talking with our various SME groups, it was really clear that if we could consolidate qualifications, it would make it easier for our stakeholders to navigate through the UEE training package. And that's what we've done here. As a result of that, and because of the low and no enrolment project, we've been able to identify that qualifications that may have been earmarked or recommended for removal from the National Register, we have been able to ensure that they are still available through this consolidated approach. So we're not losing those really niche qualifications that people may still need. So with all that being said, the next slide provides you with an overview of what we're looking at. And now this is probably the biggest shock factor. We're going from 74 qualifications down to roughly under 30 qualifications. So this is slightly out of date now, but we are looking at how we can provide a smoother and clearer pathway from the time a person enters into the UEE training package at, say, the Cert 1, through to completing their lifelong journey of learning with UEE at the advanced diploma level. We are not reducing pathways at all. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to walk you through maybe, which one will I go with? Let's go with the Cert 1. We know that there's a couple of schools in the Northern Territory that uses this. That person or those individuals who engage in that Cert 1 could then, if we go to the right of our screen, majority of our students starting your Certificate 2 in Electrotechnology Career Start, predominantly through your vet and school programs. Once they finish that, they have basically that Cert 2 will lead into any of those Cert 3 or trade entry qualifications on the Cert 3 line. So you'll see that there's an arrow from the Cert 2 to every Cert 3 available in the UEE package. If we follow down into our next line and we go to the Cert 3 in Electrotechnology Electrician, which is our highest use qualification in UEE. From there, you will see that there are again multiple pathways for that individual and where they can go. So we start to look at all the different Cert 4s available. From the Cert 3, if I follow that down into the Cert 4 in Electrotechnology Systems Electrician, this consolidates a number of electrician or post-trade electrician qualifications that are still technical in nature, but had similarities across those. There was a lot of similar units of competency across a number of those quals. We've brought them together, and what we're going to do here is provide more streams, more skill sets and specializations as a result of that. From that Cert 4, then we can go down into the Diploma of Electrical Engineering, and then into the Advanced Diploma of Electrical Engineering. All of a sudden, what we see is that a person who enters the Cert 1 can follow through, and there is a pathway all the way through for that person right to their advanced diploma, and then off to further education after that if they choose to. The other really interesting and cool thing is that we are, we talk about trade shortages, but there's shortages in the workforce that supports the trade areas, and in one of those areas, it's in your power professional roles. So what we've done is create a Diploma of Electrotechnology Systems, which is currently up on the website for feedback for those that are not trade qualified but come from other industries or want to enter the energy sector, but not necessarily want to come through a trade pathway. They want to move into those power professional roles. So it's really exciting to see that, and it will help that cross sector workforce mobility, which is really cool. On the website, based on all of this, what you'll start to see on our project page is another new, I'll just bring it up, another new drop down or box. It's called Review Drafts. Those drafts are available for initial consultation, which I'll get to in a moment because I think we've got a slide on that. So I'll speak to that in a moment. So if we go to the next slide, I'm not going to talk at you with these slides. You will get this slide pack. But what you'll notice, and we've talked about consolidating qualifications, where we how we're doing that is identified on this slide and the next slide. So when you do get a chance, please do have a read of this. This is all draft and subject to change at the moment, but you can start to see where our minds are going. And for those RTOs that are going to be impacted by this, the consolidation efforts, this is something that I think, take it away, have a look at, talk to your teaching teams about how you're going to manage this transition in terms of where we've got qualifications being consolidated, so that when we will provide more updates, of course, but it will allow you to start to plan out how you're going to implement this next year. Next slide. One of the other things that is really important for this group, and something that we're trying to ensure that all of our stakeholders are aware with this UEE project, because all of our stakeholders are impacted by this project, is that we are running bi-monthly town hall meetings where anybody and everybody can come along. And we go into a lot more depth as to what we're doing with the UEE training product, and how we're approaching it, and we're asking questions of our stakeholders who attend the UEE town hall meeting. So our next one is on the 23rd of June, 11 to 1 Australian Eastern Standard Time, and Kaya has so kindly put into our into the chat the registration link for you for the next one. So make sure you come along. They are 2 hours, and believe it or not, it's very interactive, and we run out of time. So there's a lot to be discussed at that point. And then if we go to our next slide, I will talk to this now. One of our core principles with the UEE project is building trust within the system, and that means that there is no surprises to you as the end user once the training product is up on the National Register or our beloved training.gov. Now, to do that, and with the volume of work or documents that will be coming your way, one of the things that we've decided to do is start releasing bite-sized chunks of these training products. So initial feedback, we're calling it. This is not our official government and public consultation phase of the training package organising framework. This is about allowing our stakeholders outside of the SME groups and the technical committee to see what is being developed and to provide us with early feedback so that we can incorporate that feedback into the final drafts that will eventually go out for official public and government consultation. Once the public and government consultation period is closed and we put it into, we submit our documents to the assurance body, and we will be providing you with an update on where we're at and how that is progressing, so that you are aware all the way along that where this project is at, because we know that once it kind of hits you've got a 12 months to transition your workforce into this new training package, which is a massive effort on your behalf. So we want to make sure that you are well informed along the way. So why are we doing this? We want to make sure that you're confident with what we're doing. We are not the end users. Most of us have come from an RTO background, and we know what happens when a transition happens. So we want you to be confident in that we are doing what we're doing is going to have a positive impact on you and your stakeholders. It allows us to gather initial feedback early, update those products so that by the time we go out for official public and government consultation, we know that it is 90% there. So it's about smoothing out that last part, which there are really clear and short timeframes that we need to adhere to, so that we can keep this project on time for you as the end user. So it's about enhancing the process and making it smoother for all of us, and reassuring you that we're not going to have these huge delays. So how do you get to see all of this? Well, if we go to the next slide, and Kaya has so kindly put into the link draft training products there for you. What is currently available to you right now is the Cert 2 in Electronics. This one is a consolidated effort of a few qualifications. Cert 3 in Electrotechnology, your Cert 3 in Instrumentation and Control, Cert 4 in Hazardous Areas, Diploma Systems, and your Cert 3 in Fire Detection. These are all drafts. They are there as an initial draft, and they are subject to change based on feedback. So we will provide you with the final copy at official government and consultation later in the year. But it's about gathering your feedback right now. So very clear, subject to change drafts. Any questions?
If anyone's got any questions, or you're thinking about a question that you might want to ask, there'll be time at the end. Thanks very much, Christina. The organisation's making sure that you've all got an opportunity to have a say. Really encourage you to look at those links that Kaya's put in the chat. an opportunity for people to join the town hall, to join all of the other opportunities that we have for feedback and engagement. So yeah, please have a look at those things, and we look forward to your participation and engagement. Okay, moving right along. Now it gives me great pleasure to hand over to Brett, who's going to talk through some issues that we've been coming across from a general training product development update perspective through the UEE process and some other things. So over to you, Brett.
Thank you, Nigel, and thanks, Christina, for the comprehensive UEE update. But we thought in this section we'd just address a couple of general training product questions or things that have come to light, a little bit to do with the new templates, but just people's understanding of certain sections. So the first one we'll have a look at is the licensing statement, which lives in both the qualification and the units of competency. It previously used to be built into the qualification description and in the unit of competency into the application in the previous or current products that we have on the system at the moment. The new templates actually bring it back under a licensing and regulatory heading. So we'll have a look at what we're doing in that space and what it means. And also the entry requirements. So the entry requirements is at qualification level or could be at skill set level as well, not for the unit of competency. That comes under a prerequisite requirement. So if we first off look at the licensing statement, so if we have no licensing legislative or certification requirements, that top statement there is what gets generated in the back end of TGA when we load the documents in. So if we toggle no to that statement, so you'll see that across, and whether it says unit of competency as that one does or qualification, depending on which training product we're talking to. The second statement is a PSO generated one that if we decide there is licensing or legislative requirements or implications. And what we've come up with there is licensing, permit, legislative and regulatory requirements that require this unit of competency, or it could be / qualification, can vary between states and territories. Some jurisdictions require a license or permit to perform work while being trained. Relevant jurisdictional information must be sourced prior to commencement of that unit. And that is because of the broad, like in the electrician qual, it's quite simple that you to do electrical work, you're going to need an electrical license or a training license, but it does vary across the various qualifications that we do, and it varies between state to state, territory, etc. So that's why we've gone with that more generic statement there for licensing. So if we move on to entry requirements, so the training package organisation framework specifies that what those mandatory entry requirements must be prior to commencing either a skill set or a qual, and that the entry requirements must be expressed in terms of competency or licensing. So you don't have to have an entry requirement for a qualification or skill set, but if you do, they need to be expressed in terms of competency or licensing. So one current example from our V2X, our Vehicle to Everything project, that's a 3-unit skill set currently with the assurance body, is that one there, that this skill set applies to licensed electricians or individuals that have been deemed competent in their final licensing assessment capstone, or an equivalent pathway recognised by relevant or state territory regulatory authority. So it just opens it up that an apprentice, say, who has completed but he's not yet licensed, he's waiting for a licence requirement in their jurisdiction, they've completed their capstone assessment, they would be able to enter into the units in that skill set or into that skill set. And if we just have a look at the qualification slide, the next one. So these are some drafts, and you'll see these in some of those qualifications that Christina mentioned that you can go and have comment on. So we have the top one that's a bit more generic, and that's around one of our diplomas we've been developing, particularly this statement, where you could come through a pathway of, say, instrumentation or electronics or refrigeration, and then move into a diploma where you're looking at different specialisations. So rather than saying listing all those qualifications that you may have done. We're just asking that you've completed a Certificate 3 or Certificate 4 from the UEE training package, current or superseded versions. And then a more specific one down the bottom. So this would be around those Cert 4s that Christina had in that map there before, where you're moving as a licensed electrician or someone who's completed an electrical qual into post-trade training. So in this one, we say specifically the Certificate 3 in electrotechnology electrician. Don't put the code in there. We don't put the code in there though, so we're not limiting to the most recent qualification. Or the other option for entry is that you have a current unrestricted electrical license or its equivalent in any state or territory. So that opens up for that post-trade people who've done their training quite a while ago before the certificate system came in, the competency-based training. They can still move into that post-trade training with their unrestricted electrical license. So is there any questions around any of that? Or I will pass over to Kirk to see us home.
Thanks for that, Brett, and good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to have a slightly longer update just to talk through the recent federal budget. But before we get into any of the specific measures, it's worth briefly having a look at the broader macroeconomic environment that's shaped this year's budget. And the major backdrop to this budget is the economic fallout from the conflict in the Middle East. So we've just had the biggest oil shock since the 1970s, where oil prices jumped from about $60 to above $100 a barrel this year, and global supply chains have been severely disrupted. And this is driving renewed inflationary pressure. And so as a result, Treasury has downgraded Australia's economic forecast in 2026-27 to just 1.75%, and now expects inflation to peak at around 5% in the middle of the year. So PSO has already heard anecdotal evidence from industry that rising costs are placing growing pressure on both businesses and apprentices. So we know this is already having an impact. But these forecasts rely on oil prices stabilising over the next 12 months. But we need to keep in mind that the outlook also remains highly sensitive to any potential escalation of the conflict going forward. So that's why Treasury this year has also modelled a more severe downside scenario involving oil prices rising to $200 a barrel. Now, under that scenario, Australia would narrowly avoid a technical recession, but unemployment would return to pre-pandemic levels and inflation could peak above 7%. That scenario would be particularly concerning because these kinds of economic conditions weaken business confidence and delay and reduce investment in workforce growth and skills development. We also know, based on past economic downturns, that there's a correlation between higher unemployment and lower apprenticeship commencements. So next slide, please. With that broader economic context in mind, I'll now step through a couple of the measures in the budget most relevant to our sector in the workforce. So this year there were relatively few new big ticket initiatives aimed at the energy workforce or skilling it, but the budget papers do show that the government is continuing to implement several substantial measures announced in previous budgets. So this includes the turbocharging the VET workforce initiative. Last year, $15 million was allocated to support state and territory projects aimed at increasing the teacher, trainer and assessor workforce for clean energy. And another $15 million is slated to come in the coming financial year. We also have seen progress on the Clean Energy Capital Investment Fund. And this is funding state and territory projects to upgrade training infrastructure and expand energy training capacity. And so far, 24 million have already been allocated through the fund, and the remaining funding is scheduled to be allocated in the financial year after next. So PSO's policy report last year touched on both of these measures, and we're looking to get a bit more detail from DUA on the projects that are now being funded through with these initiatives around the country. The government's also touted its recent achievements on the clean energy transition. And these include the delivery of 6.8 gigawatts of renewable energy in 2025 and more than 370,000 home batteries since July 2025. That's provided over 10 gigawatt hours of new storage capacity. Now, further details have also been released on the government's proposed 20% domestic gas reservation scheme, and that will see LNG exporters supply a proportion of production to the domestic market. Now, that scheme is due to commence in July 2027, and the final consultation on the legislation is expected to take place through June and July. And the government says this will help ensure Australian gas users have access to more stable and affordable energy supply. Interesting for us, the budget papers also reaffirm the government is continuing to work with the states and territory on national licensing for electrical occupations as part of its broader productivity agenda. Last year in November, all the treasurers in the country agreed to pursue national licensing as part of broader reforms to support a single national market under the National Competition Policy. We know that an interjurisdictional working group has now been funded to develop evidence-based recommendations on potential licensing reforms. And related to this work, the National Competition Council is conducting a review of mutual recognition schemes for workers, and PSO has made a submission to that. Now, moving on, next slide, please. We'll now have a look at some of the new items that were in the budget. One of the productivity measures that will likely have an immediate practical benefit for industry is almost $43 million over 4 years for Standards Australia to provide free access to standards referenced in Commonwealth and state legislation. This is expected to increase accessibility and reduce costs for small businesses, tradies and apprentices, with an estimated savings of up to about $1,600 per year. The budget also included more than $85 million over 4 years to accelerate skills assessment for migrant trades workers and to streamline licensing processes to help qualified workers enter the labour market faster. The reforms include modernising the skills assessment system for trades recognition in Australia, alongside pilot assessment licensing pathways for priority trades, including electricians. While this is a positive step, it's unlikely to significantly reduce the workforce shortages we see across the energy sectors or change the pressing need to grow domestic training pathways. Several new measures demonstrate the government's growing focus on the safe rollout and integration of consumer energy resources. So there's more ongoing funding to maintain battery system inspections under the Cheaper Home Batteries program, which responds to concerns about the program's design and substandard installations. Also, a new national technical regulator is being established with responsibility for technical standards supporting the integration of these resources into the national electricity market. This coincides with new research from Energy Consumers Australia that shows at least half of Australian households now face structural barriers to adopting solar and batteries. The government estimates that better coordination of rooftop solar batteries and future vehicle-to-grid resources could reduce electricity system costs by more than $7 billion by 2050. And last insights, we had a look at the accelerating electrification of transport across the country. The government will continue the electric car discount through to 2027 before gradually scaling back the scale of the tax incentives through 2029. Since 2022, the policy has helped increase EV's share of new vehicle sales from around 2% to 10%. And we're also going to see another indirect benefit emerge, which is the growth of the second-hand EV market, which is likely to support broader adoption over time. The changes to the electric car discount reflect the findings of a recent review of it. And the government says that this will help continue the incentivisation of electric vehicles while transitioning to more financially sustainable settings. The budget also has more than $40 million to support the electrification of Australia Post's delivery fleet. And this builds on an earlier $40 million package to expand curbside and regional EV charging infrastructure across the country. So overall, the budget has not been groundbreaking on skills and energy, but it reinforces the direction of travel on electrification, productivity reform and workforce mobility. And despite the scale of the activity underway, we still have a long way to go to resolve the energy sector's underlying skills and workforce challenges. So thank you for your time, and I'll now hand over to Nigel.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot for that, Kurt. For those of you that are nerds like myself, there is a lot of information there in the budget papers, and Kurt's done a great job there of pulling out some of the highlights and giving you a bit of a perspective from PSO's point of view about some of the things that were in the budget that might interest you. Okay, it's now time for you all to do a bit of work. Getting towards the end of the agenda, so we've got about 4 minutes or so for questions. So if anybody's got a question that they would like to raise at this stage, please stick up your hand or put it in the chat. We'll be more than happy to see what it is that we can do to provide you with a response. Anybody got any questions? Sarah.
Hello and good morning, everybody. I apologise, my camera is not working today, but I have been fully listening and loving the updates and so forth. My question is, so I am the Growth and Partnership Manager for Programmed Apprenticeships and Traineeships, which is a GTO. And we know, like statistically wise, the completion rates are hugely higher within the GTO space. One of the kind of works I've been working on is within the school. So I bring all the schools together every 3 months and I invite 500 schools online. And what I'm finding is obviously so much information for the vet coordinators. They're actually overwhelmed of what to actually share with the kids. So my question is, I also run roundtables with parents, and as we know, the electrical apprenticeships are the most in demand by both parents, by schools, by kids. Is there a way that we could utilise someone from your organisation to be a guest speaker to give an overview of this sort of information? Because I feel it would go a long way within the schools, but I also believe educating the parents is a big, big gap at the moment as well, for them to either help their children or speak to their organisation and say, do we have apprentices? Is there an opportunity for apprentices within our organisation?
Yeah, great question, Sarah. Whereabouts are you based?
I'm based in Burswood, is my office in Perth.
Well, as it so happens, Sarah, I've got a meeting with David and Patrick on Thursday, so I'm really happy to talk to them both about that when I meet with them.
Brilliant. Yep, fabulous. I will let them know that I've attended this meeting and give them my feedback too.
Lovely. Thanks, Sarah. And I'll look forward to having a chat with my two dear friends about that issue.
Brilliant.
Claudia's put a question in the chat. I think, is Phil on the call? I think Phil's involved in that group. Are you involved in that OzMaster group, Phil?
In a couple of different OzMaster groups, but yeah, looking at EVs in particular. So in that collaboration with the other JSCs, I sit on the technical committee looking at the new requirements for EV vehicles, which is around the mechanical side of things. So only early stages within their new qualifications that they're looking at. But yes, we are definitely involved in that and making sure that electricians have a good say within that space as well. So yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. Thanks, Phil. Taha.
You're just on mute there.
You're on mute, Taha.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah. One thing I noticed, I came across quite few people who are mature age or even like some in their middle age, and they want to do an apprenticeship, and they cannot do it because of their age. And those people, they are prepared to, to have like a low pay, or pay same like 18 years old. They have no problems with that, but they cannot, due to their age, they cannot get an apprenticeship. I don't know whether this has been addressed or at all, because I know it exists, because as I said, I was a teacher and I came across quite a few who want to do the apprenticeship. They couldn't. That's my question. Has it do you intend to address it maybe in future?
Anybody like to take that, or should we? We're quite happy to come back to you, Taha, with something about that.
Yeah, sure.
So give us a bit of time, and we'll come back to you on that one.
Sure, no problem. Thank you, Nigel.
No worries, and we might include it through the website in terms of the FAQs, or we'll find a way, Taha, of being able to provide a response to your question. We've also got a number of other questions that have come up in the chat. We're at time, unfortunately, so what we'll do is we will get some responses to those questions out to people. So really apologise for not being able to take all of the questions, but there's certainly some really interesting things there, some really interesting themes coming out. So what I'd like to do, thank you all for your participation and engagement today. It's great to see so many of you on the call. Please look on the PSO website for information about updates to UEE and a range of other things, as we've discussed on today's call, and look forward to seeing you at our next Insights meeting, if not before. So thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.